I was born in Israel. My parents were also born in Israel. I loved Egyptology since a very young age. I wanted to be an Egyptologist. I remember myself at the age of 10 years old sitting in the big library of my grandfather, looking on books with hieroglyphs. And my grandfather was a very learned man.
Mm-hmm.
He was a principal of a high school in Old Tel Aviv. It was then a very important vocation for the first Zionists, to educate in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up on excellent Hebrew.
Yes.
And he had many books, and among his books were also books on hieroglyphs and on ancient scripts and so on. And I was attracted since a very young age to the images, to the idea of writing in pictures. This is why I didn't go to cuneiform, which are these boring wedges.
Yeah.
In a way, I am here doing that, and this also carried me into this very fascinating research of the birth of the alphabet, or the invention of the alphabet, which was born actually because the hieroglyphs were written by pictures.
When was the first time you went into Egypt? How old were you?
Oh, this is a difficult question for an Israeli. I'm your Moses, actually, I was standing there for so many years and dreaming to be there.
In the promised land of the hieroglyphs?
Yeah. And I couldn't go there because I'm a real Israeli and I didn't have another passport or anything. So only a year or two after, I think it was already about 35 years ago, after the peace agreement was signed, shortly after that I went the first time to Egypt. Of course, it was more than I ever dreamed of. This is the impression that Egypt always gives you. You cannot imagine that before you are there.
What was the first wall that you went to or inscription that you read when you got there?
This I cannot remember. What really shocked me was that, in a good way, of course, that actually, when you go to a site in Egypt, each stone, that if you want to sit on a stone for a moment, you sit on an inscription.
Yeah.
And in Israel, we hardly have inscriptions.
Now, I know that some Egyptologists work in the area of, well, maybe you could clarify for me, some dig and some are involved with the inscriptions part. So
I'm a desk Egyptologist.
you work with the inscriptions?
I worked with the inscriptions because, first of all, I never had access. I have a degree in archaeology, but in biblical archaeology.
Yeah.
But I have no access to Egypt as an Israeli. And in recent years, I think this is my call.
So you were trained in biblical archaeology, correct?
No. I was trained from the very beginning as an Egyptologist. But we have two topics in the bachelor degree. We have to take two topics, and my other topic was biblical archaeology. I studied with great teachers like Yohanan Orly, David Sishkin, all the giants of biblical archaeology. I was lucky.
Yeah, you actually were very lucky because you saw a number or experienced a number of the great archaeologists of the past.
Also, my teachers of Egyptology were giants. The language expert that was the father of our school in Jerusalem, Jacob Folotsky, was a Jew that ran away actually from Germany in the Nazi time and established a fantastic school of Egyptian language, of linguistics here in Jerusalem. And my great teachers, Sarah Grohl and Gilula, and I had the best education possible in Egyptian, in the script and in the language. And for that I'm very grateful.
Why do you like Alan Gardner so? I mean, tell me about what.
Alan Gardner, first of all, of course, he was the one who deciphered the alphabet from this, what I call the sphinx, which is the Rosetta Stone. And so it goes to him, the decipherment, not to Petrie, And from him, everything started. And secondly, he was a great Egyptologist. This was the old guard, they knew everything. He was top expert on grammar, top expert on the hieroglyphs themselves, what I do now. History, religion, just name it, everything you know. I mean, and so how do you want me not to admire him?
Well, I know he said that the genius of the alphabet couldn't have been from one person.
Okay, he said it in 1916, you know, when he dealt with this material, and he was a genius and he was everything, but you know, these people, he was a very, very highly, an Englishman, highly educated from high class, and people today, what they hate in my theory is that I take this great invention, the change history from the intelligentsia of the old world to the so-called simple people, and say my inventor or inventors were just people that were illiterate in any script, and this gave them the freedom to invent, you see, because their mind was free. Nothing was told them you should do this with this picture and that with that. They could prepare a new theory and create a new theory. So, and to say something about that, everything, if you look on the 30 inscriptions in Serbit el-Khadem, 29 fit perfectly paleographically to the same period, and the whole system is there. You have even more letters than you thought you need. You have probably around 30, between 28 to 30.
Right.
So why do you say that you need more time? What will happen is that it will continue to develop. Some letters will be lost, some letters will be changed. There's no school, nobody teaches there. It goes from father to son, you know, probably in the camp at night by the fire.
The whole story of the nation of Israel comes from the Torah.
Yeah.
So how much of that do you think is historical? That's what I've been investigating.
I think that it is historical maybe, but in a very different way from the very simplistic way that people used to put it. I think these are layers and layers of Canaanite, there are layers and layers of stories in the memory, in the collective memory of the Jewish people, of the Israelite people, of something that happened probably thousands of times for hundreds, if not more, thousands years. Canaanites wanted to get to Egypt.
When you think about how beautiful Egypt is and the Nile and
it's
the
not
food.
beautiful. I don't think ancient people thought about beauty. They thought about food, and they thought about water for themselves and for their animals. And you know, when we get these dry, horrible periods in Canaan, even, and this I know from my personal experience, there is no water. So they had to go down to Egypt, exactly the picture that you have in the Bible. And sometimes they were an asset for Egypt, sometimes they were a burden for Egypt. Some of them had very good success in Egypt, and they became Josephs, and some of them became slaves because they were captured, or God knows what happened. And these were layers of memories that existed in the Canaanite traditions. And at the end, when people wanted to create this Israelite people, or they just had to create one story from all that. And they were geniuses. They created the best story possible. I don't know if it was accurate. It has the situation that being a slave, you were in the lower possible situation.
Right.
You were tortured and you were suffering. And then by the will of your God and also your power, you had to do things. You had to do things for this God. The God saved you, and you were not only saved, you became the chosen people. And you became the chosen people, and you got a country, and you had then a king that your God didn't want, and so on, if you remember the Bible. But this is a fantastic story of success. It's a story that gives you hope in every dungeon that you sit in. and it was adopted as a general metaphor also, you know, by the African Americans. And anybody who suffers can take this dream. So it's a literary creation that was created from an experience of, I would say, hundreds and thousands of years of Canaanites that had not necessarily anything to do with the Jewish, so-called Jewish god, the Yahweh, and they could have been Baal. The god could have been Baal very easily, but they were the same Canaanites going to and fro from Egypt.
The questions that I've been thinking about have to do with this writing. Could a person who might have been a Hebrew, let's say, I know there's different types of Hebrews, but let's just say there's Semitic people and then there's a group with Hebrew that eventually became the people of Israel. Could they have been a link to that early writing?
I would love that I could tell you yes, but you have to jump like 600 years. This person would have to live 600 years. So
that it's an issue of when do you think the Israelites first became a people, right?
I think it was a political situation, identity situation. The person there might have been a Moses, not the one that is in the story, but somebody that either had the interest or the wish or the power to become the ruler and wanted to. If you want to take people, it's also, you should remember that probably what you call Israelites today, probably not all of them in the best case came from Egypt, you know. Probably there was a group that came from Egypt and they had some, you know, beliefs, ideas, wishes, political wishes. If you want to create a nation, you have to give it something that will be collective belief, collective history. So collective belief, you show them a new God, a very interesting new God.
Well, if there was the formation of the nation of Israel, and there was a people, when do you think that started to appear?
I stick with my Egyptian records that mention Israelites or Israel as people.
Would that be the Merneptah Stele?
Yeah. At around 1200 BC. So it means they are there already. So you can think that all this story was, sorry for this simple word, cooking, about 100 years, 50 years, something like that before. The invention of the alphabet, according to my reconstruction and Gardiner's reconstruction, I'm in very, very good company here, took place at around, it's a long explanation, around 1840. So you have a big gap of few hundred years here. And remember, all the inscriptions in Sinai talk about Baalat. You cannot be what you would like to call them Israelites praying to Baalat.
Well, I do know one thing. The Israelites prayed to a lot of gods they weren't supposed to.
Yeah, but there's nothing there that you can connect to
them.
What
you're saying.
They are Canaanites. They are different. You see, they are Canaanites. And one group of the Canaanites that was probably collected from various people, some of them were in Canaan and some came from it, were concentrating again around another god, this Yahweh god, but this happened later. So it's like their forefathers, but they have nothing to do with Jews or with Israelites as far as the documentation. The Bible is, I think, one of the best literary pieces that I ever read in my life. I was also educated on the Bible, and it gives you so much power, and it has this million little stories weaving into each other, and I tell you, in Hebrew it's much better. It's really a pity that you cannot read it in Hebrew, because it has all these fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure we're losing, and I'm losing a lot with the translation into. Yeah.
This is lost in translation.
And there's double meanings, and there's deeper meanings. Right?
Yeah, because of the root, you know, the Semitic languages have roots. And this is a very, very delicate game for the reader, and for it's something very different. 3 words, something in the Bible, you cannot really translate it. It has a whole world in it.